Imagine a fog so thick, so pervasive, that it doesn't just obscure sight, it kills. Not in a metaphorical sense, but literally, slowly, brutally, over the course of days. What if I told you such a thing actually happened? Not in some fantastical horror movie, but in one of the most technologically advanced cities in the world, just 70 years ago? In December of 1952, London, the sprawling heart of the British Empire, became the stage for a silent, invisible killer that claimed thousands of lives, leaving a scar on the city that some say never truly healed. How could a simple weather phenomenon turn into a devastating biblical plague? To understand this horrifying event, we need to transport ourselves back to post-war Britain. The year is 1952. London is busily rebuilding, its iconic skyline still bearing the scars of the Blitz. Life is hard, but there's a sense of slow recovery. Homes are heated primarily by coal fires, billowing smoke into the already congested air. Industries, vital for the nation's economic regrowth, churned out their own thick, sooty effluent from countless smokestacks. It was a common sight, this grey pallor hanging over the city, a feature locals had come to accept, even affectionately nicknamed London Particular. But what arrived on Friday, December 5th, was no ordinary particular. A high-pressure anticyclone settled over London, bringing with it unseasonably cold, windless conditions. The air grew still, stagnant, unable to disperse the usual daily emissions. As night fell, a chilling, yellowish-black fog began to descend, not just on the streets, but into the very soul of the city. Initially, it was a nuisance. Public transport ground to a halt. Visibility dropped to mere feet. Locals joked about getting lost walking home or bumping into lampposts. They lit their fires, trying to fend off the creeping cold, unknowingly feeding the monster that was forming around them. The next day, the fog hadn't lifted. It had intensified. A low-lying inversion layer trapped all the airborne pollutants close to the ground. Particles from residential coal burning, including sulfur dioxide, mixed with industrial emissions and vehicle exhaust. What was emerging was not just a fog, but a toxic airborne soup, a deadly cocktail waiting to be inhaled. And the city was completely unprepared for what was coming next. The first unusual reports started trickling in on Saturday. Hospitals noted a sharp increase in respiratory ailments, particularly among the elderly and very young children. People were struggling to breathe, coughing incessantly, their lungs burning. The air smelled acrid, metallic, like something was burning continuously right outside your window. Visibility became so poor that it effectively shut down the city. Ambulances couldn't navigate the streets. Drivers abandoned their cars. Even West End shows were cancelled because the audience couldn't see the stage, and the smog seeped into the theatres, making people choke. Yet for the first 2 days, there was a strange, almost complacent acceptance. London had seen bad fogs before, right? This one felt different, though. It was thicker, denser, with an almost physical weight to it. The streets grew eerily quiet, the usual hum of city life replaced by the sound of muffled coughs and the occasional gasp for air. And then the deaths began. Not just a few, but a noticeable spike. Initially, these were dismissed as typical winter ailments, exacerbated by the cold. But the truth was far more sinister. The inhaled sulfur particles were turning into sulfuric acid within people's lungs, literally burning the delicate tissues. Oxygen levels in the air dropped. The sick, the old, the infirm were essentially suffocating in their own homes, in their own beds. Pets, too, were dying. Birds dropping from trees, cattle in markets gasping for breath. The smog was indiscriminate. By Monday, the city was in a state of quiet panic. Funeral parlors were overwhelmed. Coffins ran out. Respiratory wards were overflowing. Doctors, battling through the suffocating haze, were confronted with patients whose lungs were shutting down, their faces cyanosed, their bodies racked with desperate rasping breaths. Even fit, healthy people felt their chests tightening, their eyes streaming, every breath a conscious effort. It was a siege, not by an enemy army, but by the very air they breathed. What was truly terrifying was the slowness of the onset, the creeping nature of the killer. It didn't strike with sudden violence, but rather seeped into every crack, every breath, every corner of the city, inexorably tightening its grip. And the weather forecast offered no hope. The anticyclone showed no sign of moving, meaning the toxic blanket was here to stay. The authorities, slow to react, were losing control of an invisible crisis that defied conventional understanding. The city, once vibrant and bustling, was now a silent, choking tomb, shrouded in a deadly, unnatural darkness. The true horror was just beginning to unfold as the invisible gas continued its deadly work, unnoticed by many until it was far too late. For 5 agonizing days, the Great Smog held London captive. Businesses remained closed, schools shut down, and public life almost entirely ceased. The death toll continued to climb, silently, relentlessly. It wasn't until Wednesday, December 10th, that a shift in weather patterns finally brought relief. A strong westerly wind swept through the Thames estuary, eventually dispersing the lingering, yellowish-black shroud. As the fog lifted, Londoners emerged, blinking into the grey daylight, stunned by the silence and the lingering acrid smell. But the horror was only just beginning to be truly understood. The full extent of the devastation became clear only in the weeks and months that followed. Initial reports estimated around 4,000 deaths, but further epidemiological studies, meticulously sifting through death certificates and hospital records, painted a far grimmer picture. The total number of fatalities directly attributable to the Great Smog eventually swelled to an estimated 10,000 to 12,000 lives. Many more suffered chronic respiratory illnesses for years afterward. The victims were predominantly the elderly, the very young, and those with pre-existing conditions, but the sheer scale of the disaster was unprecedented for a natural event in modern times. The Great Smog forced the British government, initially hesitant to acknowledge the catastrophe, to act. Scientists from the Department of Scientific and Industrial Research conducted extensive analyses. They found that the fog was not merely water droplets, but a deadly aerosol of sulfuric acid, ammonium sulfate, and other toxic particulate matter formed from the sulfur dioxide released by burning coal and diesel. This potent cocktail was lethal, turning human lungs into corroded sponges. The tragedy spurred significant action, culminating in the passing of the Clean Air Act of 1956. This landmark legislation prohibited the burning of coal in urban areas and encouraged the use of cleaner fuels like gas and electricity. It mandated the relocation of power stations away from population centers and introduced smoke control zones. It was a direct response to the horrifying realization that industrial progress and unchecked pollution could become a silent mass murderer. The iconic London particular became a relic of the past, replaced by cleaner skies, a testament to what happens when humanity is confronted by the raw, undeniable consequences of its own actions. However, the memory of those dark, choking days would forever linger, a chilling reminder of how vulnerable we can be to the unseen forces we unleash. The Great Smog of 1952 stands as a chilling monument to humanity's capacity to inadvertently create its own doom. It wasn't an earthquake, a tsunami, or a plague carried by microbes. It was a tragedy born of everyday life, of how we heated our homes, powered our industries, and moved through our cities. It was a slow-motion catastrophe, amplified by exceptional atmospheric conditions, but fundamentally caused by human activity. The Clean Air Act was a triumph, a recognition that environmental health directly impacts public health and mortality. But decades later, as cities around the world still grapple with ever-increasing pollution crises, from Beijing to Delhi to Los Angeles, the lessons of London's killer fog remain profoundly relevant. Are we truly learning from history, or are we simply waiting for the next unique set of atmospheric conditions to turn our everyday emissions into another silent, deadly killer? The skies of London are clearer now, but the fundamental challenge of balancing progress with sustainability, industry with public health, still looms large. The memory of those who suffocated in 1952 is a stark warning that sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't supernatural beasts, but the ones we create ourselves, floating invisibly in the very air we breathe. If you found yourself unnerved by the insidious nature of this invisible killer, then you might be intrigued by the next video, where we explore another hidden danger that lurks in plain sight, a danger most people unknowingly encounter every single day.